You guys know that feeling when you start watching a TV show, you don't know what to make of it, but it's firing in all cylinders, it's really impressing you with its writing quality, production values, acting, basically all the stuff that matters. The good times keep on rolling for a few episodes, but as you get to the halfway point, a nagging little voice in your head is telling you, this doesn't really feel right, or I'm not really sure about this, until that nagging voice is completely right by the end, once the finale shits the bed. This is what happened with HBO's Watchmen, and it is a very sad thing to say. Because I was one of the biggest proponents for the HBO show's existence, particularly when I heard it would be set 35 years after the original comic book. It would be starring a largely new cast of characters who live in a world after the squid attack of the comic. How would the world change on that? And I'm always a big fan of alternate history stories. Damon Lindelof purportedly did some really cool stuff in spite of his very shoddy, let's call it, filmography. And those first few episodes, when I saw them, really made me feel that we were going to be getting something like Darwin Cook's Minutemen, a Watchmen-related thing that doesn't necessarily have to exist, but by the time it's all over, you're still going to appreciate that it does. It would validate its own existence through its consistent writing quality. Unfortunately, this is not Darwin Cook's Minutemen. This is closer to Samurai Jack Season 5, where it starts really good, the middle act is kind of losing some of its foundations, and then it all goes completely to crap. In fact, it goes to such complete crap by the end that it feels like a completely different set of showrunners, writing staff were brought in halfway through to finish up what the last team did before they were fired. But it's not. There was no big creative shakeup behind the scenes. This was a smooth production from beginning to middle to end. It really is just a case of someone having a good starting point and then completely losing the plot by the end of it. To give a good example of how the writing quality declines, we're going to showcase an example from the first episode and the very last one. I'm going to keep things as vague as I possibly can to avoid spoilers, but you're going to understand what I mean. One of the first big scenes of episode 1 is a cop stopping a dude who's kind of drunk driving, going over the speed limit, and we see that the cop has a mask on him. We don't initially know why the cop has the mask, but we know that it is there to protect his identity. And once the cop realizes that the man in the car might be someone legitimately dangerous, he might be armed, and he might try to kill the cop goes back to his car, and then he reaches for a special holster where his gun is. However, he can't just take the gun out. He has to call the police headquarters. He has to give them a fucking bureaucratic threat assessment of the individual in the car. Does he really think he's dangerous? From a scale of 1 to 10, how dangerous does he think the guy is? Blah, 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 blah. So for 5 fucking minutes, this guy is just trying not to lose his shit. He knows that the guy in the other car is dangerous, that he could just take a regular gun out at any second and shoot him. And by the time the bureaucratic process is completely over, the guy he stopped does take a machine gun out and does almost kill him. It's very much Damon Lindelof and the show critiquing the whole idea of holding cops accountable, how it is important, but if you take it too far, you're just going to make the police force a completely neutered, ineffectual thing that won't even be able to protect itself, let alone anybody else. And it's this kind of thoughtfulness that permeates throughout the vast majority of, I want to say, the first 3 to 4 episodes. And then the final episode is just a hodgepodge of different master plans coming to fruition, of characters jumping in and saying, oh no, I knew you would do this, and so my plan planned for your plan. And then someone else jumps in and says, nuh-uh, I planned for your plan, which planned for his plan, and it's just a big pileup of convoluted conspiracy bullshit that absolutely no one can possibly care about unless you're riding the hype of the show, like a lot of the people watching and reviewing it are, with the final climax being something that's out of a bad Watchmen fanfic. And you guys know the kind of fanfiction I'm talking about. The stories where an author's pet original character is going to show up, they're going to do it better than everybody else has ever done before, including the proper main characters. They got all the answers, they know how to fix stuff, they're going to get the power to do it, and it's always incredibly obnoxious and bad. But the difference between Watchmen and those fanfictions is that that kind of bad fanfiction is almost immediately obvious. It's very transparent what the author is going to do, where the story is going to head, and so you can quit relatively early on and not lose much time. The HBO show is possibly the most insidious example of this kind of writing I've ever seen, because the show goes out of its way to fool you that it has actually something cool or interesting to say or questions to pose, only to devolve into said bad fan fiction writing. And before someone tells me, well, the ending is ambiguous, if you've even seen anything Damon Lindelof has implied about what actually happens after the screen goes to black, you'll know that he very much leans into his pet character getting you-know-what by the end. It's very hard to take the ambiguity of a story seriously when the guy setting it up doesn't really respect it himself. Now, if Lindelof told anyone who asked him about the ending to fuck off and decide for themselves, that would showcase that he actually does respect his own writing, but the ambiguity feels less like a conscious writing decision and more like a way for him to pretend the story is smarter or more interesting than it is, and to leave people with some kind of questions to ask about what happens when the screen goes to black. Basically the kind of standard cliffhanger writing that a lot of drama shows like to do to keep audience interest. Except this thing is probably not going to get a follow-up season. I don't even know how you could do one and not make it even shittier than this already was. So Damon Lindelof is just gonna kind of get away from it. He's not gonna do a second season, so he can just leave that question hanging up in the air for clickbait and hype culture to keep clickbaiting and hype culturing about to pretend that the show is better than it actually is. So yeah, Damon Lindelof, when it comes to bullshitting the audience, you are a master bullshit artist, my friend. When it comes to giving a satisfying conclusion, you're about as good as J.J. Abrams, buddy.